Okay. At this time, I will now hear from those wishing to speak who have submitted speaker cards. If anybody joined after we began, the speaker cards are over on the table to your left. Please fill them out and bring them up here to my supervisor, Dan O'Donnell. Okay. All right. The first speaker is Ron Ziff.
Thank you. The microphone.
We all get to project.
Okay, I will do my best. My voice may not carry because I've got a little bit of a problem right now. I'm here from the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, Chair of its Land Use Committee and Vice President of the Council. This project appeared before the Land Use Committee 3 times and once before the Council Board. On the initial appearance before the committee heard a number of complaints about the design. It was rejected at that time. At the subsequent 2 appearances, there were many corrections made in the design at the committee's request. The balconies on the rear were removed. The height of the building was lowered, and where the building was more squared off, it is now slanted down towards the back, and that was because the properties behind complained that they might be shaded from sunlight. And with that slanting down, the properties in the back will have full access to the sun. One of the things the committee insists on with new construction is that the back look just as good as the front, so the neighbors are not offended by large blank walls. And in this case, we requested a lot of landscaping, and that was added. The committee finally approved this and sent it on to the board at our April meeting, and at its May meeting, the board had a split vote. They voted not to recommend approval at this time, but asked the applicant to come back next month with answers to a number of questions that they had. So we anticipate they'll be coming back to us at our June meeting. Some of the requests that have been made are, not speaking for the board, speaking personally, I think are well justified, but not within the power of the applicant. There was a request for a crosswalk at Tyrone and Magnolia, and a request for a signal there. We think these are both very justified. There is traffic, heavy traffic. There's a need to get across the street for the residents of the community because there's a public park there, and they do need a signal on a crosswalk, but that's something this applicant can't provide on his own. And that's the end of my comments unless you have questions.
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Sean McCartney. Cartney.
Shut this off. Thank you very much. My name is Sean McCarthy. I'm a member of the West Valley Warner Center Chamber of Commerce and also a member of the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council. This is the 4th time that I've spoken on behalf of this particular project. Twice in front of the Sherman Oaks Planning Committee, Neighborhood Council Planning Committee, and once before the full board. The challenge that I think we have here with the opposition to this particular project is that the developer is being asked to do things that are not within the developer's control. Putting in a crosswalk and a signal, removing utility poles and putting utilities underground, vacating a public alley, and restricting the use of parking on public streets by tenants in his building I believe should not be considered in this particular instance. And those are the things that are going to be going back to the full neighborhood council to consider. These are the kinds of things that oftentimes come up, but really are not germane to the zoning issue with regard to this particular building. I say that in all due respect to the neighbors in the community, they need a crosswalk. That's something that the council member, the City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation, are the only ones who have it within their control to provide. Further, I think since this is a zoning issue at its heart, at the second and third hearing on this before the Plum Committee, the Plum Committee in fact said that yes, the zoning was appropriate in this particular instance. However, it was being held up for design issues. So we know that the zoning was already approved in principle by the Neighborhood Council Plum Committee in their own words. So this is really what you're here to decide today. I recognize that there are design issues here, but this piece of property does deserve the change in zoning. If there are issues with design, it can always come back to Neighborhood Council and be considered further at that time. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Dean
Grand.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
So my name's Dino Grand. I live at 14241 McCormick Street in Sherman Oaks, right behind the proposed development project. My wife and I purchased our home on McCormick Street a little less than 2 years ago. Before we entered escrow, we were very much aware of the 5 houses in question and the apartment building, the large apartment building next to those 5 houses. And before escrow was opened, we checked with the ZMS webpage, which has all of the zones for the lots in Los Angeles, see if those lots were indeed R1, and in fact they are, and they're R1 today. We did not want a large apartment building in our front yard, essentially, and that's why we checked the zones. We did our due diligence, and my feeling is that zoning is meaningful, that people make decisions based on the zoning of property, they make financial decisions, they make choice of life decisions. They want to live in a certain type of neighborhood, and zoning impacts that. And again, we do not want another large apartment building in our front yard. And so the thought is if zoning is going to change, which is possible, I understand, but there has to be a severe and mitigating reason in order to change a zone. And building another apartment building is not one of them, in my opinion, especially when the neighborhood is primarily single-family housing, R1 housing. Mr. Heidt does own those houses. He can very easily refurbish them. He can sell them. He can rent them. He can do lots of things with them. They showed you the bad state of the alley. Well, that's Mr. Heidt's garages that are in a bad state. That's how he maintained them. And that makes me wonder how he's going to maintain this new apartment building that he's building. In terms of the Sherman Oaks, the Van Nuys Sherman Oaks community plan, there is a conflict. I understand that. I didn't even know when we bought the house that there were community plans, but I don't work in City Hall. I think knowing zone, I thought we did a good job by checking the zoning. But that plan was developed, I believe, several decades ago, and the City of Los Angeles chose not to change the zone. And when we did our due diligence to see what the zone was for those houses, they were R1, and they are still R1. And I think the city has to own up to its mistake if it didn't change the zone, and not impact our lives when we based our decision on our very expensive home partially on what the zone of those 5 houses were. Again, we did not want, and we probably wouldn't have bought that house if the apartment building didn't built there. Just to reiterate, I oppose the zone change due to the fact that zones mean something and can negatively impact the character of a neighborhood if they're changed. A zone should never be changed without a severe and mitigating reason to do so. This is not one of them. If Mr. Heidt does want to build a 29-unit apartment building, he's free to do so on land that is currently zoned to do so. There's lots of property in Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Next up.